Well, here we are, plowing our way through the dog days of winter. But even though that title made sense a couple of weeks ago, winter really didn't feel all that bad last week. In fact, it felt a little bit like spring. Of course, according to the Weather Channel, we can expect what they call wintry weather. I don't know what that is, but it sounds bad. By around 4 this afternoon. Still, it was nice to see the sidewalks free from all that nasty snow and ice, at least for a while. And even though it's not going to last, given what we had in January, well, I'm going to be thankful. But regardless of the temperature, we're still working our way through this series on how we might handle that blueness, that blahness some of us get during the winter season, and that all of us feel from time to time. And during the first 2 messages, we talked about a couple of different things that might help us get through this kind of sadness. For example, we talked about how it's really important for us to understand that we're not alone in feeling down. In other words, at any given time, we're not the only ones experiencing sadness. Now, that's one thing we discussed. And then last week, when we were down in the fellowship hall, we looked at how deciding to trust in God can offer a lot of help when we're frustrated and discouraged, even hopeless. And the reason it helps is pretty clear. You see, when we trust in God, we've decided to believe that He simply loves us and that He has the power and authority to do something about it. Now, that's what we've already covered. And this morning, we're going to look at something else that I believe is helpful when we're feeling blue. And I can say that because what we're going to talk about has helped me in both the past and in the present, and I expect it to continue to help me in the future. Let me explain it. Now, this may come as a shock to y'all, but there are times when things happen that, well, sort of bring me down. Of course, sometimes it's my fault. Like I went totally blank on a kid's name during a wedding service I was doing yesterday. Went totally blank on his name. And sometimes it's the fault of somebody else. Like when Victor Oladipo went down with a season-ending injury and ruining an otherwise great Indiana Pacers season. And then sometimes it's something that just is. It's just the way it is. Like finding out that Hugh Jackman, you know the one I'm talking about, Wolverine, is actually 50 years old. Birthday's in October. And let me just tell you, I hope I look that good when I'm 50. Anyway, these are some of the things that frankly bring me down. But I found that sharing these sad feelings with someone who has unconditional love for me really, really helps. And I'm talking about unconditional love. And of course, when I say unconditional love, you know exactly who I'm talking about. Coco Chanel. Now, I know this may be crazy. It certainly sounds crazy. But when bad things happen and I feel either discouraged or frustrated, I've discovered that sharing those feelings with Coco really seems to help. And I'll tell you why. When I'm down, I really don't want to hear a bunch of reasons why I shouldn't feel down. I don't want to hear that. Nor do I want a whole bunch of advice on what I should be doing to feel better. Man, I'm not an idiot. I already know what I'm feeling. I already know what I'm feeling. It's real. I blew the name. Victor is injured. Hugh Jackman is 10 years younger than me. And I also know these feelings aren't permanent. They're going to go away. It's not like it's something that has scarred my soul. No, when I'm blue, I just want someone to listen. And when I'm through complaining and whining and blaming, I just want someone to love me anyway. And how can you look at that face and not feel love? But of course, for as good as Coco is, we have someone who is far better. with whom we can share our feelings, and that's what we're going to talk about this morning. You see, I think when we're down, we can share our feelings with God, and we can do it through prayer. And that can really help us deal with this sadness. And that's going to be our focus. And to guide our discussion, we're going to answer two questions. First, what is this kind of praying all about? And second, why are these prayers important? And I'll tell you, of those two questions, I think the first one is probably the easiest to answer. You see, prayer is simply our sharing with God. That's all it is. Us talking to God. Of course, there are all kinds of different stuffs we can share with Him. I mean, we can let God know how wonderful we think He is and why we appreciate everything He's done. Those are called prayers of adoration and thanks. Or we can tell Him that we're sorry for something that we regret doing and ask for His forgiveness. That's what we do when we pray a prayer of confession. Or we can ask God for help, right? You ever ask God for help? We can ask God for help. We can ask God to help somebody else. That's called intercession. Or to help us. That's supplication. Now, these are some different kinds of prayers, and they're prayers we see around the church all the time. But I'll tell you, I think there's another kind of prayer called a lament. And although we don't talk about it much, it's just as important as the others. And it involves sharing feelings that are generally on the negative side. In fact, it's a lot like coming before God and venting our emotions, particularly our sadness, our frustration, our hopelessness. Lucky God, right? And I'll tell you, it's this kind of prayer we see all over the place in the Bible, especially in the Psalms. For example, just listen to what the psalmist wrote. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far away? Won't you listen to my groans and come to my rescue? I cry out day and night, but you don't answer, and I can never rest. I am merely a worm, far less than human, and I am hated and rejected by people everywhere. Everyone who sees me makes fun and sneers. They shake their heads and say, trust the Lord if you are His favorite. Let Him protect you and keep you safe. That's a lamentation. But this kind of stuff isn't just in the Psalms. I mean, remember right before His crucifixion, this is what happened. Jesus went out to the Mount of Olives, as He often did, and His disciples went with Him. When they got there, He told them, pray that you won't be tested. Jesus walked on a little way before He knelt down and prayed. Father, if you will, please don't make me suffer by having me drink from this cup. But do what you want and not what I want. Then an angel from heaven came to help Him. Jesus was in great pain and prayed so sincerely that His sweat fell to the ground like drops of blood. Now, this is what I mean by venting. You know, sharing troubling and uncomfortable emotions. And in these prayers, these laments, the feelings are always directed towards God. In other words, they're not shared with a philosophical concept. They're not being shared with the Brahman or Nirvana or the Force. And they're certainly not being shared with a stick or a bush or some other idol, not even with a dog. Rather, these painful emotions are being shared with the one whose authority is absolute and whose love is unconditional. In other words, when we share with God our sadness and pain, even when that sharing sounds like whining and complaining and venting, not only can we believe that He hears, He also cares. It's like another psalmist wrote, you are my mighty rock. Why have you forsaken me? Why must enemies mistreat me and make me sad? Even my bones are in pain. While all day long my enemies sneer and ask, where is your God? Why am I discouraged? Why am I restless? I trust you. And I will praise you again because you help me and you are my God. And from another one of the Psalms, Our God, how much longer will our enemies sneer? Won't they ever stop insulting you? Why don't you punish them? Why are you holding back? Our God and King, you have ruled since ancient times. You have won victories everywhere on this earth. By your power, you made a path through the sea, and you smashed the head of sea monsters. You crushed the heads of the monster Leviathan and fed him to wild creatures in the desert. You opened the ground for streams and springs and dried up mighty rivers. You ruled the day and the night, and you put the moon and the sun in place. You made summer and winter and gave them to the earth. You see, when we share our feelings with God, that's what this kind of praying is all about. And why is it important? I mean, how can it help us deal with sadness? Well, I can tell you it's not because this is some kind of magical way to solve our problems. Now, I understand that seems to be what a lot of folks believe. Or at least that's the kind of thing they say. You know, that God is sort of like this gumball machine. You put in a prayer, turn the crank, and out pops what you want. That's what those outright, upright, downright happy all the time folks say. And I'm talking about those Christians who are either living charmed lives or who are faking it. I'm telling you, if we're sharing our frustrations and sadness with God, if we're complaining and whining and blaming, if we're lamenting because we expect him to make us feel all fuzzy inside later, I'm telling you, we're going to be disappointed. Because God is neither a divine Percocet, nor is he offers a heavenly bottle of Jack Daniels. But that's not to say that the sharing doesn't help us, because it does. You see, it allows us to bring out our inner darkness, out of our inner darkness. Those emotions that a lot of folks around us would rather us keep buried. I mean, they don't want to hear us say it. They don't want to hear what we're saying, feeling. You see, it enables us to shout or to cry or just complain, to blame him. And to do it with the assurance that no matter how negative we sound, we're going to be heard. And this was something Jeremiah, the guy called the weeping prophet, understood. Speaking for God, he said, I will bless you with a future filled with hope, a future of success, not of suffering. You will turn back to me and ask for help, and I will answer your prayers. You will worship me with all your heart, and I will be with you and accept your worship. You see, when we share with God what we're feeling, I'm telling you, he hears. But more than that, he also loves. In other words, no matter what we say and no matter how whiny we sound, God is still going to love us. And this is something we can see in another one of the Psalms. I mean, right after complaining to God about all the bad stuff that was happening in his life, this psalmist ended his prayer by saying, proud and violent enemies who don't care about you have ganged up to attack and kill me, but you, the Lord, are kind and merciful. You don't easily get angry, and your love can always be trusted. I serve you, Lord, and I'm a child of one of your servants. Look on me with kindness, make me strong and save me. Show that you approve of me. Then my hateful enemies will feel like fools, because you have helped and comforted me. You see, when we approach God, we can know he hears and loves. And that's why it's important to direct our feelings to him. And like I said a little while ago, that kind of communication is really what prayer is all about. And when we're praying to God and sharing our sadness and disappointment, not only are we getting those feelings out into the open, getting them out of our system, we're directing them to someone who loves us, who will love us in spite of what we might say. You see, I think we actually feel better when we release to God these emotions. and they're the emotions we often try to repress. Of course, I also think it helps to be able to share them with one another, people we can trust. And that's something we'll talk about next week. Amen.